The following is my conversation with Steve Smith. Steve is, at the risk of sounding hyperbolic, he's probably one of the most accomplished and interesting people that I've met in the cycling business, in addition to being a hardworking and genuine guy. Steve started his career at Nike in Oregon. His dream job was working for Nike. He grew up in Oregon. And after 10 years with the Swoosh, he decided to up and move him and his wife to Europe. I asked him, why he did this. He said, just wanted a new adventure, discover something new. And where he landed was at Manifattura Valcismon in Veneto, where he went on to help the Cremonese family to reacquire the Castelli brand from bankruptcy and take it literally, I guess we could say, almost to the moon, because it's become among the top brands in the cycling clothing business. I'm really fortunate to have met Steve throughout my career, and I'm really, really excited to share his story with all of you in the cycling world. This is the Business of Cycling podcast.
All right, man. Well, Steve Smith, we've known each other for quite a while, and I'm really excited to talk with you today about your journey. It's really amazing. I'm excited. You've been sort of someone that, we both work in the industry. I think you came to Italy. What year did you come to Italy?
2000.
2000.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you were here a little bit before me, but I worked in the business. We kind of crossed paths at the Red Hook Crit, where we kind of got to see a real revolution in the way that cycling is communicated. And you were kind of at the forefront of that. But I'm excited to talk with you today. And I guess maybe just to get started, can you just tell me a little bit about where you're from and your kind of childhood?
Yeah. So thanks. It's a pleasure to be on here. So a bit of a fan, and so also followed your business or your path through this. So we've got a lot of shared experiences. So it's a pleasure to be here. Also, touching the salient parts maybe of my history, I grew up in Boring, Oregon. And Boring is actually the town name. That's not an adjective. That's an actual town.
Okay.
And so I think it was that kid always on the bike from 4.5 years old. And now I got a dirt bike, of course, out in the country outside of Portland.
What year were you born?
In 67.
67. So you got kind of that BMX.
Exactly. And then I got a road bike must have been right around 1980. But I think the future started to become more clear in summer of 85. I got my first real race bike and my first real cycling jersey. So that was kind of at the tail end of Greg LeMond.
Yeah, LeMond.
Renault Elf Giton jersey, which I bought it because it was a Greg LeMond jersey, but had a little scorpion on the upper chest.
Okay. All right.
And that same summer, I built up my first real race bike, which was a Basso Gap, which Marino Basso won the world championships, and a bit of a sprinter. So they had a Columbus SL with SP back end on it. And I got all my components from Campagnolo Super Record Group as a 17-year-old. So it was a pretty swanky bike for back then.
Yeah. Was there a shop in town that built it up?
Yeah. No, I built it up myself in my parents' basement. It was awesome. So
you're kind of like technical. You like doing that kind of stuff?
Always done my own mechanics.
Okay.
Work. Just lately, I'm fed up with Di2 and disc brakes. So I've started taking my bike to the mechanic, but they never do it quite right.
You're a roadie. You're a roadie through.
No, I've raced mountain bike, track. Okay. I started on the road.
Okay.
But no, so fast forward, this is my destiny back then. So live in the province of Vicenza with Campagnolo. I live on the same street as Alcide Basso, who owns Basso Bikes.
Okay.
And I run Castelli. So 17 years old, my future.
Okay, we got to back up though. So you grew up in Boring, Oregon.
Yeah.
Family, like big family, small family.
A sister. Yeah.
One sister. Parents worked like
middle class.
Yeah. Working did they teach her what kind of?
My dad worked in IT and my mom was a secretary. Okay. So I actually bought the bike, all that stuff on my own. But I worked in summer jobs.
What kind of summer jobs were you doing?
In a warehouse at a bookstore. So it was instead of training, I just working to save up money to buy the bike. So that's kind of the story of my racing career.
Okay, sure. So you probably didn't have very much success.
No, I made it up to Category 2 and did some of the big races like Tour of Willamette, Cascade Classic. So I got to race with the pros, but there was never any question of where my spot in the Peloton was.
Okay.
Monday morning when they were cleaning their chains, I was back at the office.
Sure. But it sounds like you enjoy work.
Yeah.
And did you go to college?
Yep.
What did you study?
Majored in business and French. So this is part of the trajectory. So I spent my sophomore year of university in France. And then
where did you study? What school?
So it was just outside, it was in France, just outside of Geneva.
But in the U.S., where did you study?
It's a liberal arts university called Walla Walla College.
Just near your hometown, or?
No, in Eastern Washington.
Okay.
So,
but economics and
business and French.
Economics and French.
So
okay. Why French?
So it was a possibility to do a year abroad and still not really. So delay the
graduation.
Yeah. No, so there's a possibility to do a year abroad and then just still keep on track with the business studies. So,
but you were curious about like the world, because in America, people may not know this, but Americans tend to be kind of provincial. Some Americans tend to be somewhat provincial. They kind of see their own, and like anywhere, there's people that are provincial, people that are less provincial. Sounds like you were sort of worldly, would you say?
Curious, maybe.
Curious, yeah, that's a better word.
And no, so it was more of a adventure. So, and then of course, spending a whole year in France, it was only 12 credit hours to finish the French major. So I really thought the business major would be the useful one.
Okay.
But then graduated, and as you do in Portland, the dream job was at Nike. So
okay, so you were aimed at Nike pretty early on.
Well, that was always a kind of a dream thing. I did look around for other jobs after
you
school.
seem like a really focused, like you get an objective and you focus on it. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, maybe I get distracted as well.
You do,
yeah. So,
but
anyway, come out of school
to figure that out. You wanted to study in France. You went and studied in France. You wanted to get a road bike. You got the job. You got the road bike. You wanted to race. And then you wanted to go and you wanted to work at Nike.
Yeah.
And you went and worked at Nike.
Yep. And so started out at Nike. And if you've read the book from Phil Knight, Shoe Dog, I came in basically at the tail end of that. So. Amazing time to be at Nike from 1990 to 2000. So
you worked at Nike from 1990 to 2000.
Yeah, so it was absolutely amazing time. It was still almost a small company when I came in. We were about 2.4 billion. And then when I left, it was 12 and a half. Now it's 60 or something. So
right.
Yeah.
Department were you working?
So I started out in sales operations. So I was providing sales reporting support to the VP of sales, and so it was kind of amazing job of being, I didn't have any decision making really, but very deeply involved in a huge number of huge strategic decisions.
In terms of sales?
But in sales from the company that kind of reinvented the way the sports business is run from a sales standpoint.
Yeah.
Moved from there into forecasting, and then in 1995, had the opportunity to go to Nike's European headquarters just outside of Amsterdam.
Okay.
And this is when Nike was moving from having separate distributors or subsidiaries in all the countries in Europe to try to bring it together of almost a United Nations of Europe, of Nike. And so this is when they were moving a lot of the operations to a centrally managed function and then keeping sales and marketing in each country.
Okay.
And this was working still in sales group as we're trying to bring, you wouldn't say unified, but more to coordinate all of Europe. So it was absolutely a fascinating time of transitioning a Nike business model across Europe to really look at Europe as a big market to be coordinated together, because we already had a lot of retailers that were pan-European, whereas Nike was operating very, very much country by country basis. So 2 years in Nike Europe, and then back to the US, where I was product line manager on the Nike cycling footwear, which was the fun part of the job, and then the sandals is the $70 million dollar business that actually
paid the bills.
Yeah, exactly. So I had spent 90% of my time on the sandals business, but got to play around with the shoes, and it was kind of the end of the Tomac years, and that's when Armstrong was coming back from, tail end of cancer treatment, and his coming back.
So you went to Amsterdam, and you were able to work more on the operation side of things.
More on the operations side, yeah.
But yeah, so your time, what was the work that you were doing specifically in Europe?
Here again was forecasting and then the sales operations reporting. So really, because it was quite a significant change in the way Nike approached sales in Europe at the time.
And so what did kind of just being involved in that side of things, you were continuing to kind of hone your skills around forecasting, around planning? What were some of the things you learned in that experience?
Yeah, but also along with strategy, how to deal with the big accounts, how to segment, how to, everything from discounts to seasonality to go to market. It was
everything.
Yeah, it was a small team running at that point. The Nike's European business was just over $1 billion.
And you were seeing a lot of it.
Yeah, so it was just like being on the front lines of all of that. So it's kind of a remarkable time to just from a perfect perch to see kind of everything
formative
that's
experience.
going on. Yeah.
And then you came back and you said that you were working with a couple of different product lines. So you went from being this European, kind of helping in the European side, then to actually managing specific product lines.
Yeah.
And so you were getting a really good kind of look at all different parts of the business.
Yeah, in effect, I kind of touched on operations, on sales,
product
marketing, product creation.
Amazing kind of school.
So, exactly. And at the same time, any sport you want to play, you've got world-class athletes, and the average age of the company was
sports marketing
28 or 30 at the time, and we had 2 fitness centers. So
it was a fun time.
It was almost like it was better than university.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah.
And so you're there. It sounds like you did about as much as you could possibly ask, or at least it sounds like you had a pretty good run there. And then you made a change. Mm-hmm. Why? And what was the change and why?
Yeah, so my wife, we were already married when I was with Nike in Holland, and it was a good opportunity for me to go back to the U.S. for a career advancement. She wasn't quite ready to go back. So
is your wife from Europe?
She's American.
She's American, but
and
she liked living.
She had lived in Scotland as a kid, in Germany. So this was already her third experience in Europe, and we enjoyed the whole European experience and weren't quite ready to go back. So discussion of are we going to go back or not? It was kind of like, yeah, we'll go back, but we'll look for a new opportunity in not so distant future. And she said, where? And I said, I've always loved Italy. She hadn't even been. And so she said, okay.
Wait,
so
wait a second. So you guys
we targeted Italy, and we start taking Italian lessons, and just came on holiday, and just
like that.
You know, after late 20s and no real family responsibilities or anything, so.
There's sort of
what are you going to do?
No, I get it.
Tie yourself down and have regrets later in life? No.
No, I get it.
You can put your career on pause and go off on an adventure.
So you said yourself, I've done a bit at Nike. I had a really nice run, learned a lot, got a ton of experience. Your family was kind of telling you, hey, I really like Europe. We should try and spend some more time there. And you felt comfortable enough to say, yeah, let's do that.
And then also when you go to school and a university, they kind of take care of everything. And when you're a Nike expat, they take care of everything. So there's also the challenge of let's go somewhere where we have to survive on our own.
Okay. Sounds like your wife is also somewhat adventurous.
So if you can pick anywhere in Italy where the bureaucracy and everything, they're going to make it as difficult as possible. And you got to see if you can survive on your own.
It's like a hard mode.
Where do you go? Yeah. You go to Italy.
Expat on hard mode.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've done the easy round twice. Let's go try the challenging one.
So you and your wife said, you just sat down, you were just sitting around one day and just said, hey, where should we go? That was the conversation.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. And so Italy was what you settled on?
Yeah. So we start taking
Italian lessons
at the local community college, and went through the whole series there. And then kind of get to a point of are we going to do this or are we going to forget it and settle down? So because if you think you're going to move abroad in a few years, you don't ever really plant roots.
I've talked to so many people that say, oh, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Never.
They never. Yeah.
They never
so
do.
it was kind of like that time of, are we going to step off the cliff or are we going to forget about it. And we'll think about it when we retire.
So what was the move? It was just like get a plane ticket or like
No.
What was the
There was always the idea of gotta find a livelihood first.
Sure, of
And
course.
So started looking up various opportunities in Italy. So had a couple of opportunities that weren't quite right, and then got in contact with Manifattura Valcismon. So
would you have been looking on the internet, or how were you
no,
doing this?
actually, one of the projects that I worked on at Nike is when Nike decided to divest of the cycling business and license it out to Trek. So I was working on that project, the licensing project. And so the Trek I was working with a consultant who a lot of people listening to this will know, Tim Maloney, who's been in the industry forever, and he was living in Oslo in Italy. And so putting together all the details, a business plan of how this could all work. Spent a lot of time with Tim and told him about my dream project adventure, and he was the one that put me in contact with the Cremonese family.
Okay.
So sent off an email with my resume, and 2 weeks later, Dario writes back, and next thing I know, the next week I was planning to travel to Thailand for work. I changed my return flight, landed in Milan the morning of Milan San Remo, so grabbed the rental car, drove to the Poggio. And from there, just made my way back to the other side of Italy on the Sunday, did an interview on Monday, and
Got hired.
4 months later, we'd sold everything we owned and gave away the cat, moved to Italy.
And what was your role, your initial role that they hired you for?
Yeah, so it was, at the time we had the Sportful brand. So, and my first interaction with Sportful was back in '97 when I'd followed the whole Tour de France with, or no, '96, I'm sorry, the Tour de France with the Nike. It was the first year the Nike sponsored the yellow jersey. So I did the entire 3 weeks of the Tour de France, and just remember the first nice day after 12 days of rain. Stage that started in Turin. Johan Museeuw comes down, and he's got his hot weather shorts on with all the perforated lycra side panel, and just seared in my mind that Sportful is a brand that really gets in and understands the needs of athletes. And so when Tim talked to me about, excuse me, so when Tim talked to me about Sportful, like, that'd be cool. And Sportful also did cross-country ski, which has always been cross-country skiing since a teenager, so it seemed like the perfect fit. And so I came over and interviewed, and
So
seemed to work. So the
Sportful, both cross-country and cycling, both brands. Okay.
it was one brand.
One brand, both sports, sorry.
And so I was involved on export sales, product marketing, overseeing the marketing group, and of course it's pretty small at the time, so you end up doing a little bit of everything.
Sure.
And
you weren't used to that though, or had you, like, being in a smaller company like this? Was it a change?
And for sure it's a big change, but I mean, you kind of always do what you need to do. I've never been one to say that's not part of my job description.
No, not that. It's
And,
just
yeah.
was it a bit of a change in terms of, like, having to understand and
Yeah, there's a lot of the principles or concepts I learned at Nike end up being applicable here. People see Nike as a big marketing machine, right? But unless you're really in it, you don't realize how efficient the mechanics are of that company. Like the operations part, they're second to none on it, and the approach to sales, to product innovation, to product marketing, even the structure of product engine, all of that I've found has been really useful too.
Sure.
And of course, you don't come in day one and change
No.
a 60-year-old family company. So it was, fortunately, I had to learn to market and learn a new language and learn a new culture. So kind of my development in it
took a little while.
But I mean, probably in hindsight, it was probably better that the things I tried to change, maybe I moved a little bit slower than I would have if I'd come in and, like,
Guns blazing,
swing into my big sledgehammers.
Yeah. So you come in, you're sort of, I mean, it probably wasn't a new job for you in a sense that having seen what you had seen over at Nike, it was something that you probably could get your arms around pretty quickly, but it was more of understanding the market, understanding cycling a little better, and then learning Italian and understanding the dynamics of a small Italian company. So it's probably a big learning curve there, I presume.
Very big.
And was Castelli part of the group at that time?
No. So in the first 4 years in the company, I was just working on Sportful. And then in 2004, we bought Castelli. And initially, it was more of an investment and that we would share the production resources, so get the economies of scale on the production side. But within a year, we figured that there's a lot more integration we could do. So we closed down the office in Milan and moved Castelli here to Fonzaso.
Were you part of the acquisition of Castelli?
I was kind of on the outside. It was really an investment by the company. But then my first involvement was poking my nose into the U.S. part of the business for Castelli.
Did they have distribution already?
So they had a joint venture in the U.S. And so Castelli was going through a rough patch, we could say. And so the U.S. was as well. So got involved in trying to figure out how to get first involved in looking at the U.S. business. And then when we closed down Milan and moved it here, then I was put in charge of both Sportful and Castelli brands. So overseeing,
And it's been that ever since.
Up until 2014, when it got too big, and
Right.
we've hired a brand manager on Sportful.
Sportful side, yeah.
So that reports to me. So I've got overall vision on all of our cycling business, and then more of an operational role in the Castelli brand. So a strategic role over the entire cycling business.
And so you started looking at the U.S. market with sort of a kind of the initial mission on Castelli, it sounds like, where, or at least, I guess I'm trying to understand where you were focusing your energy in those early years.
So let's maybe jump forward to 2006 is by the time we had it completely here at the Sportful headquarters. And that's when we really tried to refocus the Castelli brand, because for a few years it kind of bounced all over. They'd even gotten into cross-country skiing, into mountain bike, into running, some effort into triathlon, and kind of a lot of widely varied products, as well as a little bit more of chasing the market rather than leading the market in terms of products. So a little bit unfocused there. But more than that, the vision of Castelli in that early 2000s period was, let's say, almost like a sport fashion kind of thing, almost like the more fashion side of Patagonia. I mean, Patagonia makes some great products, of course. That's did Castelli then.
But it wasn't quite as road focused or cycling focused.
And so I would kind of say it was almost like the Patagonia, trying to be the Patagonia of cycling, with a very, very much a focus onto travel and that. And in some ways, it was kind of prescient, because that area of our sport of cycling really has blossomed over the last few years.
Yeah, reemerged. I mean, Rafa did a really good job.
Yeah, but I think what was wrong is you have the brand that had 120 years, 130 years of experience, that had written all the rules of racing. I mean, the racing brand, trying to shoehorn into a soft travel kind of image. And consumers didn't really respond to that so much. So we, excuse me. So when we really tried to reposition Castelli, it was really going back to its roots.
It was
Castelli,
easy. Sounds easy.
It's funny you should say that, though, because the strategic part of, I mean, it was almost like I never had any doubt of where Castelli should go.
Yep.
So it was very clear strategically where we should try to position it. So the hard work, a lot of hard work, was on actually doing it.
Yeah.
But doing the work isn't so difficult if you're absolutely 100% sure of where it should go. Yep. And so, fortunately, the founder of the Castelli brand in cycling wear it came out of the company Vittorigiani that had started in 1876. And so just before World War II, the company became owned by Armando Castelli, and his son Maurizio was born in 47. And so Maurizio grew up and was racing and had an accident. He was actually Italian national champion on the track as a junior. But then at 19, he'd been in an accident, got hit by a truck and broke his hip. And so his racing days were over. Went to work with his father, and his father was very much the craftsman, the old school wool. And in fact, if you go back into the 50s, any jerseys from the 50s, if you roll up the bottom of the hem and the front of the jersey, you'll see label on there. It says Vittorio Gianni, because it was dominating cycling clothing back then. But back then they didn't put the manufacturer's logo on the outside of the jersey. So Maurizio grew up around cycling. His father was close friends with Fausto Coppi, so we have photos in the archives of little 7-year-old Maurizio up at the Velodive velodrome with Fausto Coppi. So, but Maurizio ends up having his cycling career cut short, goes to work with his dad. But Maurizio was always the innovator, the huge passion for art, creativity, and so it was kind of like oil and water. So there was a period from 74 that Maurizio set off on his own. That was the start of the actual Castelli name and the Scorpion.
Okay.
So
74.
From 74 to 89, there was both Vittorio Gianni and Maurizio and Castelli in parallel. In 84, they joined back up in the same offices and everything, and they kept the Vittorio Gianni brand alive for another 5 years, but then it all went into Castelli. So, but Maurizio, he was the first guy that brought sublimation printing to cycling, which is still what we do today on
Right,
the
it's the
jerseys. Also says they invented the Lycra short. So I've talked to a lot of people that were around at that time, and let's give Assos credit. Maybe they made a short, but there's little doubt that Castelli was the first one to bring Lycra shorts to market. And the stories from back then are crazy, because it just,
right.
You look at, there's a period there in 78, 79 when half the peloton was in
Wool.
Lycra shorts that they had bought. And at that point, Castelli called it the aerodynamic short, which was kind of, it was crazy because back then nobody was really thinking about aerodynamics, but Maurizio was already onto that. And it was one size fits all and only black.
Okay.
So you see photos from taken from behind a peloton from back then, and like half the guys have on Scorpions. It was like the GABA of the day. And so no, Maurizio did Lycra sublimation printing. He was the first one in 84, 85 to bring in winter clothing out of synthetic materials and membranes rather than just, heavier weight wool from back then. So it was already revolutionizing winter clothing as well. So all the way through his time was really the innovator and at the forefront of racing.
And that was sort of the DNA that you were able to kind of tap into.
Racing, innovation, performance.
Yep. And those are sort of the pillars of your positioning in Castelli. And so you just were kind of using this as a playbook.
We didn't really do much more than call back what Maurizio had been.
Makes it easy to,
Maurizio had a heart attack and died at the age of 47 in 1995. So from 95 to 2004, it bounced around a little bit and had a pretty nice run in the late 90s when they were doing the Once team and Prosecco clothing and the Progetto Y bib shorts. So a lot of good things even through that period, but then fell on some difficult times.
Sure.
So.
And that's where you and the Cremonese family, and then you were able to kind of come on. And I guess you've been, working with Castelli has been sort of the biggest growth engine over the years for Manifattura. And it sounds like, I guess if we want to go into, because there's a period where it started in, when you guys took over the brand, and then you obviously up until now, where you guys really have solidified your position in the market. I guess when you took over, and like that's a big period there, but the positioning was super important. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other elements that you have brought to the table over these years that you feel like has been the differentiator for the brand?
Yeah, so break it down maybe into some of the product innovations, because we were the first ones to bring aerodynamics to road clothing. I mean, go back to 2007 and everybody was wearing big floppy
Jackets,
jerseys. And the Aero Race jersey came about when I was at Interbike in 2006. That was when Zip made the first 404 wheel with the dimples on it. And so just the idea came, it's like, what if we put dimples into a jersey? Make an aerodynamic jersey, because they were claiming like 4 watts saved over, or 40 seconds over an hour time, or a 40K time trial. So we started down the road of making aerodynamic jersey, and it had never been done before. So there was no book for it. So like, where do you even start? So it was
innovation.
Yeah. So it was crazy. So that, and then
Product.
of course we built into the stuff like the GABA to the speed suits you see that everybody uses now with that full front zip that's open on the bottom, something that we innovated here.
And these are things that, is this like part of your team? Like, you find people, like, how do you get to where, because in cycling, having a really innovative product is essential to be a leader.
Yeah.
Right. And for you to be a leader, is it the people that are around you? Is it like, how do you feel like you guys have been able to stay in that position?
Yeah. So I think it's part of it is, again, go back to, like we said at the beginning, of curiosity, and maybe even going back to my racing days, because I was never the hardest trainer. I enjoyed racing. I didn't really like training, and I don't think I have a huge natural gift for it, but it's always been a hobby to do. And so I was always trying to tweak my bike to find the fastest bits for the bike, and then understanding the impact that clothing could have really opens up that idea of just looking everywhere for those gains, for the improvements. And then you have to continue to also question everything. There's like that opportunity can be lying anywhere. But those ideas come really when you're out riding your bike. I mean, you can't just sit around a table and brainstorm it. It's like, when you're riding, there's that point when like the lights come on and it's like, wait a minute, here's a problem that we could solve. And then the team we have in here is amazing. We have basically all the innovations we've come up with over the last 2 decades come from our lead product developer, Sonia Vignati, who unfortunately January, February, she's going to retire. But she started out when she was 16 years old in a factory doing buttonholes on Castelli shorts, back when the wool shorts had a little pocket on the back. And from there, she moved up to stitching in chamois. And then she's worked on Castelli her entire career.
And she's part of the innovations that you guys are coming up with.
So it's like the ideas we come up with, and we, like, as soon as we can really define it, like, it's passed to Sonia, and she worked on it becoming a reality. And then the pattern maker, Stefano Sartor, who also has 30 plus years of experience in this business, has been, we've asked him to invent stuff that's never been done before. So that creative team, it's like it comes alive when there's some new challenge that has never been done before.
From a product side.
And then going back to the bigger question of like the key things, I think that we've done an amazing job of building a international team of people really dedicated to the brand and to promoting the brand and really feeling part of the big Castelli family. So people absolutely is crucial to this, and developed a ton of really long-term relationships. Big extended family, which we have sales meeting twice a year, so we get about 100 people in from around the world to come for a few days and just get updated and live the brand. So.
But from a distribution standpoint, you guys are among the strongest in Europe, as well as, and I know in the US you guys also have really good distribution. I guess over the years, like, you're talking about the people, obviously the product is a big part of it. Are you guys direct in Europe?
So we're direct in Italy, Austria, and Germany. And then we work through with distributors in the other European countries. A couple of countries we have sales reps, sales agents. But even where we have distributors, part of it is still a mixed hybrid model of, especially the pre-season orders.
Some direct.
Pre-packed and shipped direct. But calling these guys a distributor is kind of not quite.
They're partners.
Right. Yeah, because distributors almost sounds like they send an order, we ship it, and it's done. Whereas, this business, just The apparel business is messy just because there's so many SKUs with short lifetimes and seasonality. So there has to be close collaboration. You can't just...
You have to have partners.
Yeah.
And with all of because cycling clothing distribution has changed a lot in the last 10 years with the online business. And I imagine that with that happening, that it's really important. Like, how have you guys had to get your arms around this? Because clothing has historically been something that, there's been a lot of new players come into the market. You guys have really, it seems like you've kept your space in the stores and everything like that. But when it comes to all this discounting that we see and all of the onlines, what's kind of your philosophy around that? And what are some of the rules that you like to stick by?
Yeah. I mean, the number one rule is you'll always be learning and always be adjusting, because the ground is constantly moving under your feet.
Absolutely. What we say today is going to be different tomorrow.
Yeah. And the trajectory kind of happened in the cycling business, that in the early days of online retailing, the online players were doing maybe 10% discount, and it wasn't that disruptive because a lot of physical retailers, if someone comes in, they're going to do a 10% anyway. And buying online, there was a lot of friction in that transaction. So it was almost a good thing because it enlarged the pool. And then there was a period around 2013, 2014 that I'll call it the Amazon influence, where this is when Amazon really had their huge growth period, but they were losing money, right? So, I mean, Amazon retail didn't make money until 2018 or 2019.
Right.
Even when Amazon started making money, it was off of web services. So the Amazon model of, scorched earth, just doing whatever it takes to get market share, and then we'll figure it out later, came to online retail and cycling of outside players identifying this is a market where we could do a small Amazon model of just buying up market share. And so this is like overnight almost, a number of the big European players got bought up or maybe the founders were looking to sell to private equity or something, that all of a sudden everybody had to gain market share at any price. So the discounting
was the way. Okay.
Yeah. So there was a bit of a challenge there to put that genie back in the bottle of and that's when the Castelli brand was hot. So a lot of retailers were using us as their loss leader. So there's rules around what you can do to around pricing. So there wasn't a whole lot we could do, but in one way or another, we managed to get some sort of stability back to the market, which kind of stayed there until beginning of COVID, and then everything, people were paying full price for everything, so the pricing issue wasn't so much of an issue. And then, of course,
after COVID,
the correction has been, you see the bankruptcy.
It's been messy.
Of Wiggle and internet stores in Germany, and a lot of retailers had to move out of some inventory positions, and we as well. And I think, the clothing market, a lot of us are back into very, very good inventory positions. In fact, we're actually lower than we were pre-COVID. So if anything, we're under inventory.
Okay.
You see a few others that, just by the amount of promotional activity they're doing, that they still need to move through some product, but I think by mid-25, we should have most players back to where they need to be. And retailers are definitely coming back and buying what they need. What they're not doing is speculative purchasing.
Pre-ordering.
Because the COVID bust wounds are still very fresh.
Okay.
And I think...
so retailers are investing less.
Taking less risk and not jumping onto maybe some opportunities that aren't guaranteed. And I think that the difference is that pre-COVID, and it got even worse during the COVID boom, is that buyers really had a pretty long leash on to buy what they wanted to buy.
Okay, sure. And because there weren't a lot of, they hadn't had their hands slapped.
Yeah. And especially during the COVID boom, it's like they had the CFOs to buy everything you can regardless.
Yep.
And so they were buying stuff that they knew was worthless, but they had
mandates,
right, to buy more.
Yep.
And now we've kind of whipsawed to the other extreme, where I think every single PO has to have a signature from the CFO now. So, and the CFOs are a bit more reactionary, that both going up as well as going down. So it's going to take some more time to get back to full normality, but I always see, I think it's gone from being a light at the end of the tunnel to the glare in our eyes almost.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So,
But you, as the brand manager here, cycling manager, you saw, this is something that I run into a lot. You saw the way that brands communicate to customers changed drastically over the years that you've been here at Castelli. In a sense that, when you started in 2005, 6, it was maybe a catalog, maybe some ads in the newspaper or in magazines, a little bit of, a lot of PR, I imagine, where now it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter,
Meta, Google.
Meta, Google.
Yeah.
And that has completely kind of changed. I guess I want to talk a little bit about, now that you've seen all these technologies, and I know that technologies and I guess communication methods, what you've seen over the years, I specifically remember that you guys on Instagram, you guys jumped into Instagram really heavily. You've always been you seem to be very attentive to where the brand is positioned. Red Hook Crit comes to mind. So I don't know if you want to just talk a little bit about that journey that you've gone on when you're working with your marketing team on how you want to position the brand and how you guys approach the channel strategy of communication.
Yeah, so maybe even more than the distribution, the marketing, how you reach the consumer is changing even more. Has changed even more dramatically. I mean, you just named TikTok. 2 years ago, we probably wouldn't have done that. You might have said Twitter, and like, where has that gone to? So, and I think that's part of what we've done well. Our marketing manager, Soren Jensen, he's also very curious, so he's always jumping onto the newest platform. He's jumped onto a few that haven't panned out as much. But
part of the game.
Yeah, but it's always been this way, that, and now even more so, that there is no single silver bullet, right? You got to
test, try.
Yeah, you got to reach people through multiple platforms. And now, of course, the platforms are so much more targeted, but there's so much more stuff just
being
spewing at
fire hosed at people. Yeah.
But if we go back a few years when it was magazine advertising, you'd have a beachy sport with 80,000 copies, but how many people would really see your ad? Yeah, so it's before we had a lot of wasted messaging that didn't reach the right consumer. Now our messaging is much more targeted, but it just gets drowned out in the noise. One more I would add to what you said before is, like, I think one of the most effective marketing pieces we'd ever done in the history of the brand probably was the Cervelo test team. I mean, that team, there was that golden period in 2009 when it was a second division team that ended up being, in May of that year, it was the number one ranked team in the world. And Heinrich Hausel was the number one ranked rider in the world, right? And this was a team that, with a lot of guys in the team, came in for a second chance, but the cohesion in that team was amazing. And it was the only team that had aero bikes, aero clothing, aero wheels. And I mean, from what we know now, they probably had a 25, 30 watt savings on everybody else in the peloton.
But those things you can't build those. I mean, sometimes those.
But even it was at a certain time when, like, the focus of the cycling market was very much on pro racing. And the media that we saw, then we started to see a lot more media through the internet than we'd ever seen before. But it was how much of it was racing focus? Almost all of it, right? And even the bikes were available. There was the top of the line bike that was in the Tour de France, but then you go down to the entry level bike, and they were all road racing bikes, heavier and whatever. But and our activities were very much road racing focused. And then what's really changed is, now we see more cycling media through social media. We see what real people are doing, and for sure that pro cycling influence has dropped off dramatically. I mean, people still watch it, but it's almost, a lot of people are watching it more for entertainment rather than inspiration.
So you think that you think what you're seeing is that the overall interest in road cycling is
well, the viewership hasn't drawn off.
Right, but it's on different channels now.
some different channels, but we might, 15 years ago, we watched that and we tried to go out and emulate it. Now we watch it and then we go out and ride our gravel bikes or our endurance bikes, or we do an endurance ride, but we're not going out as much of training, racing, Grand Fondos and that kind of thing. So the consumer is very much doing what's right for him rather than watching what the pros do. But what the pros are doing now is much less. I mean, it's hard to imagine yourself doing that, right? I mean,
Sure.
They just fly up the mountains and yeah.
So I guess one thing we didn't talk about was you were able to take your experience at Nike. What I've always been really fascinated with is you had almost 10 years at Nike, and you come in and you get this brand Castelli, and you're able to apply some of those kind of concepts around, mixing the athlete and the athlete and the sport and the passion around it. Did you feel like, I mean, it almost seems like it was like you were, having done that, like Castelli and the market here was just ready for you to kind of come in and disrupt it. Did it feel that way? Because cycling was different back then. It didn't quite have, the look that it has now.
I know.
And I think Rafa was doing some really innovative things as well. But I think can you just talk about what you were able to bring from Nike to Castelli?
Yeah. Maybe I'll give a note to readers. You notice that why it said Nike. In Italy, we call it Nike. It's easy to forget because the real name is Nike.
Okay. I'm from Nebraska.
In case any of the reader or the listeners,
it's Nike. All right. Nike.
I'm speaking Italian, it's always Nike. If I'm speaking English, it's always Nike. But no, I wouldn't say it was ever really a conscious decision to do.
No, of course it wasn't.
That there, and
but
maybe
looking back,
maybe it's just natural because that's kind of the
that's
only thing I'd ever done.
That's what you knew.
And
but it was a distinct advantage.
But Castelli is a performance brand. I mean, it's kind of a natural place for it to go to.
You had this wealth of experience with a performance brand that you were able to just turn on.
Yeah. And it was a good time to do that with too. I mean,
the market was ready for it.
Yeah.
Because cycling, I mean, you don't have to say it, but I'll say it. Brands weren't very evolved with their communication, right? They were provincial, I guess is the word. Like they were behind. There was a lot of custom, which, was left up to whomever.
Yeah.
Rafa really did. I know that it hurts every time I say that, but I know they're a competitor of yours, but they did a good job and they were able to bring more people to the market. And they had more of this travel vibe where you guys were more of the performance racing oriented. And so I guess that did line up. And so by doing that, by bringing all this know-how, I mean, I feel like you guys had a head start, or you had a head start.
Maybe, yeah. Well, and then an interesting thing too is that I think with my background in Oregon where it's rainy climate, and then where our headquarters is here in Italy, we're first valley into the Dolomites. We have hottish summers and really cold winters, and we get as much rain as London or Portland or Brussels, right? So we get quite a bit of rain here. It's not as many days of rain, but then we have mountains right at our back door, so we can go even in like late summer. We can go up to Monte Grappa and find cold weather to test our winter products. So we have like this almost ideal spot to test ground for all kinds of weather conditions.
And from that point of view, you guys were able to really kind of turbocharge the products in the I guess you call it the foul weather, winter, because those products I presume at that time were underdeveloped. That category was underdeveloped.
It was nothing.
There was nothing.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of shocking, but what we were all writing in the early 2000s, heavily influenced by the outdoor market where if a drop of rain comes in when you're out in the wilderness, it can be life or death. Whereas in cycling, you can be riding hard enough that you're going to be wet from the inside. But we were still making garments to outdoor industry specs.
Sure, which didn't make sense.
Didn't make sense. And outdoor industry fit, and you couldn't really take it off and put it in a jacket. And we had stuff that didn't really breathe, and a jacket from that era compared to now, if you were to put it in a wind tunnel at 50K an hour, it's probably about 60 watts.
Okay.
It's like at least 2 gears different. And so, yeah, that GABA story is kind of a complete story on its own, but it was just, it came from listening to riders, and that product in particular was, Gabriel Roche, nicknamed GABA, was asking for a product on those wet days that weren't that cold. And so talking it through, initially he was asking for like a waterproof vest, and it's like, wouldn't it be better to cover your shoulders? Like, yeah, but his real point is like, you don't want to cover up too much because it gets heavy and slow, and you get too hot. So it's like, it was just keep your core body warm without overheating. And so, the fundamental idea of a GABA is a short sleeve rain jacket. And I mean, it doesn't take a genius to know you're never going to sell a short sleeve rain jacket. And so
it's a tough sell.
Yeah. So I was sure we'd never actually sell any of it. In the first season, we only sold 268 pieces in the entire world. But most of those ended up on pro riders Thomas Vogler went in and bought 30 pieces at a retailer for his entire team. And it was the first GABA on the Cervelo test team, guys, was at Het Nieuwsblad in 2010, and the explosion of San Remo in the snow was actually 3 years later. So the GABA was out there for 3 years, kind of like building that underground vibe with the pro racers before it really exploded into the bigger market.
Again, like kind of some things that came together, some sort of kind of the stars aligned. And for people that don't know that, I mean, I'm sure most of you have probably heard of the GABA, but one thing that it does is, and I'll just give you my, layman's kind of description is it's got the Gore-Tex membrane, which pulls away, or it keeps the heat in, but it pulls away the moisture. Is that correct?
I mean, there's a decent amount of breathability through it. There's actually a small amount of air permeability through that membrane. So that's part of why it works so well, because there's actually dry air coming in, picking up the wetter air. So a lot of the products on the market have no air permeability. So if there's any breathability going on, it's because you're wet inside. And so the GABA, it was actually a really good balance between letting that excess heat get out
at the right time, not always.
And keeping enough of the outside moisture coming out from coming in.
Yeah.
Now with PFAS being outlawed, or the end of PFAS, forever chemicals coming down the pike. So all that's changing now. So it's been a fun time to really reinvent our cold weather gear now with new regulations, and figuring out that some of what we've done over the years hasn't been the best thing for the environment. But
I imagine you'll find a solution.
Actually, it is pretty exciting because when this was starting to come down the pikes, we've had 3-4 year notice that Gore was going to cut off. They actually just stopped making that fabric 2 months ago. But so we've been working for 3-4 years now on the next thing, and even a year ago, it looked like what was going to come had significant compromises in one area or another. But what we've got coming for winter 25 is actually better in every significant measure than where we've been in the past. So more waterproof, more breathable, more stretch, and more expensive, of course.
So one big topic that we have to touch on, because it's kind of touched everybody, was COVID. I know that you guys had probably had just a pretty wild ride, just like a lot of other companies. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened, just from your take on when COVID came down, and sort of the stages that you mentally went through throughout that time?
Yeah. Wow. I'm just trying to think what I could add to what's already
been said.
Yeah. I mean, for us here in Italy at our headquarters, we went through that 7 weeks of hard lockdown.
Yep.
Like, left the house 3 times in 7 weeks to go to the grocery store. But then we were back from then on, was back at the office full time. And never had a significant period of not being in the office.
Okay.
We did things like half staffs in some departments and to mitigate the risks and stuff. And then, by April
2020,
clear the demand was gonna.
You could feel it quickly.
Yeah. I mean, there was only It's probably like a month when it was like, the world's going to come to
Yeah.
an end.
Are we gonna?
And then it started. When the first good signs came in, you didn't quite believe it. But then I remember like going out riding in late May, early June, and just like the roads were clogged with cyclists. And so the rocket ride up was, in a lot of ways, was frustrating because there's a lot of demand that you couldn't meet. You're spending all day, working on demand that you can't meet. And looking back to it, is maybe it was too easy and we got a little bit lazy. And then, of course, when the crest happened, then you're trying to right size your business. So there was a bit of a challenge, but it was like just exactly the opposite challenges. But now it really it's been about a year now that you can it was clear that we'd touched bottom. And
Right. You kind of see the
what's an interesting thing that maybe the wider world doesn't see is that, the boom going up meant that the entire supply chain was adding in a lot of resources. But when we hit the peak, it's like we had 4 times our normal level of finished goods inventory. We also had 2.5 times the amount of fabrics as we would normally have in the warehouse to make stuff. And then where we have distributors, they had upped their buying because they had just come from 3 seasons of not being able to supply their retailers.
So they wanted to be ready.
They wanted to be a buffer so that they would have product to supply the retailers. And the retailers overbought because they thought there was a lot more demand there.
Right, and they didn't want to miss the bus.
Or they had that CFO telling the buyer,
Yep.
just buy, I don't care what
Go.
it is, just buy.
Yep.
And so and then consumers, because of the scarcity of stuff we bought. I mean, I'm still going through chains and brake pads that I bought back in 2021, right?
Okay.
Because they were.
You didn't know when you were going to get
I
them.
have inventory right in my garage. And so, when it kind of came to a quote halt, it was like a pile up on the highway where the first guy tapped his brakes, but then as it goes back, it's just everybody. And so I heard of one of our suppliers that's really specialized in making specialized components for the cycling apparel industry. And unfortunately, he's not diversified out of cycling, but everyone listening to this this podcast has something that he's made.
Okay.
Hanging in their closet. And from 22 to 23, his business dropped by 90%. So the guys at the back of the pile up, they got hit especially hard because everybody in front of them was full up of their warehouse. So, the guys at the very end, the fabric suppliers and the factories are seeing business drop off by 70, 80, 90%. So the factories had to scale back and let people go. And so we're seeing as things have picked back up.
It's hard to watch.
It's a little bit like restaurants that let people go during COVID. And those people went out, bought extra, or found new jobs. And so even today, you see a lot of restaurants that are understaffed or have reduced hours because they're not able to hire back the people. And so we're having trouble building back up that capacity back to pre-COVID levels because of that reduction we saw
Personnel.
a year and a half
Personnel.
ago. Yeah,
the personnel flex of that has been a challenge.
Yeah, and so another thing that people don't really realize in clothing, all of the yarns that go into the nylon and polyester yarns that go into our cycling clothing, there's like 7 global producers of those yarns, and one of those went bankrupt. So you've got, on a micro scale, you've got 15% of the capacity of that industry gone. And so it's like there's upstream in the supply chain, it's kind of insane what's still out there, and it still needs to get worked through.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to, this was such a big part of it, and I know we've talked about it a lot, but there's just so many stories still out there of just a really strange time, and hopefully, something we won't have to go through again. Yeah. But so in terms of like your work, this is a family company, right? Mm-hmm. And you work closely with the family. And I guess when it comes to one thing that I was really curious about is do you still feel like a foreigner, or do you feel like you're integrated now into this place? Because we're both, I was about 30 when I came here, same as you.
Yeah.
And it was hard for the first years for me, but I feel really part of the country now. And I guess you and your wife, do you guys feel very much part of this community now?
Yeah, most of our socials interactions are Italians, and Italians are super warm people. And
You're happy.
Yeah,
You seem like a really happy.
And
You do.
most of the time I don't really think about being a foreigner, but yet
You are.
No, I am, and so I'll never feel Italian. But I've been out of the U.S. now for 24 years. I don't really feel fully American now either.
Right,
And
totally.
so it's kind of like I think I'm somewhere over the Atlantic right now.
And your wife, like this whole thing, you tried it. It seems like it's been a success. What would your wife say?
Yeah, she's happy to be here too. So this is home.
Well, cool. This is an amazing story, Steve. I really appreciate you giving me your time today.
Thanks. Yeah.
And I think if you have some time, maybe we can get together again and dive into some other topics.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, this was fun.
It was fun. Thanks, Wyatt.
Okay.
Yeah.